the Committee for Monetary and Economic Reform, COMER, has filed a lawsuit against the Finance Minister, the Minister of Revenue, the Bank of Canada, and oh yes, Her Majesty the Queen. Just to get everyone up to speed, in 1974, Pierre Elliott Trudeau handed over the reins of the Bank of Canada to the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, owned by Nathan Mayer Rothschild and 30 to 40 of the world's wealthiest people. Hey, who wouldn't want to give them control of our bank? I mean, they're so good with money, right? The Bank of Canada has been accumulating debt like you wouldn't believe since that time. The IMF has been charging us interest on our loans that we are taking from the Bank of Canada as civilians and as a government, and in turn making our national debt skyrocket. At the moment, our national debt sits at $614 trillion. That's an individual share of $17,000, $381. Now let me tell you something. I don't have that kind of money. And I sure as hell know that my 2-year-old son doesn't have that kind of money. So what the hell is our government up to? Well, they seem to be fine with the growth of the national debt being close to $8 million per day. That being $331,000 every hour. But the economic think tank COMER thinks a little bit differently. They see what happened to our bank in 1974 as unconstitutional, and therefore they filed a lawsuit against the Finance Minister, the Bank of Canada, and oh yes, the Queen of England. What COMER, the economic think tank, wants is simple. They want to reenact proper usage of our constitutional Bank of Canada, so that when us as Canadians go get loans, and our government and municipalities go get loans, they don't get charged interest that goes into the pockets of Mayer Rothschild. Because seriously, fuck you. So this lawsuit has been bouncing around in court, being appealed after appealed after appealed. And what that means is they're basically pushing it back. They're telling the guy, go write it up again. Oh, you know what, I don't like that? Go fix it up. And they've been doing it to the point where, since it was filed in 2011, they have had several big wins. And last week, they've had one of their biggest wins of all. And it looked like it might hit the national spotlight. But there was one little problem. It didn't.
For Canadians, do you care to speculate why the conventional media has not covered this case?
Well, I don't think it's speculation to say that I have firm basis to believe that the government has requested or ordered the mainstream media not to cover this case. I've had indications of that, but I can't reveal those sources.
Now, the cover-up in the media is not a big conspiracy. The Canadian broadcasting networks are owned by 6 large corporations who have heavy investment ties in keeping the status quo. So they are not going to broadcast something as fundamentally shaking as the Canadians taking back their Bank of Canada from banksters.
Do you believe that this case has a direct bearing on democracy in Canada? And do you believe that we are living in a democracy in Canada?
Well, no, I don't believe we're living in a democracy. I've publicly stated as far back as 1999 that we've entered a quiet dictatorship. This case does speak to democracy, both in terms of the struggle to bring the case forward, but more importantly, the fact that the mainstream media has been told and is acquiescing to not covering this case, which is beyond me, because of all the cases I've done, this is probably the most important case, in my view, that I've done as a constitutional lawyer. Meanwhile, my other cases get wall-to-wall coverage across the country on a regular basis.
There's an obvious reason why they don't want to talk about this in the media. What's the discourse going to be like? Oh, by the way, Canadians are trying to take back their bank from Mayer Rothschild and his group of cronies. Do you agree? Text yes or no to CTV. There's going to be an onslaught of yeses. Now, it's pretty obvious why this is not being portrayed in the media. Because it's a one-sided story. No Canadian is going to side with the banksters. No Canadian is going to be like, you know what, I believe that large corporations have our interests at heart, and we should, in fact, follow their every move. No, if you put this on the mainstream airwaves, you will have everyone clamoring at that courthouse for a big win for Canada. And the mainstream media is not going to let that happen. They're going to continue to push the status quo. So what we have to do is do what we do best. Let's use the internet to share this story with our friends and family. Let's get them to realize that, hey, we have a Canadian bank that is run by the IMF, Mayor Rothschild and his cronies. And all we really need to do is talk about this. Talk about what are the options. Well, one option is to take it back so that next time you go and you take a loan, you're not paying interest to those mofucks.